Welcome to Brands of Value, the show about underrated marketing and growth strategies. I'm your host, David Göz, and today's special guest is Ethan Decker. Ethan Decker is the missing piece described in the last episode. In last episode, Michael Reinecke spoke about brand as a process, and he was very adamant about bringing more science into the world of marketing, especially here in Germany. Well, Ethan is just that guy. He took his interest from a PhD in ethnographics and made it his mission to collect, sort, and apply the collective body of marketing research to the real world. He spent his career in marketing and filled many roles in strategy, planning, and insight, but now he's helping companies understand and apply marketing research with his company, Applied Brand Science. Welcome to the show, Ethan Decker. In the intro to the podcast, we learned that you're a scientist in ecology, right?
Yes.
What does a typical day in the life of a scientist look like, and what does it mean to be a scientist in the world of marketing?
Well, a scientist in the world of ecology can look quite different. On the one hand, you might be a lab ecologist doing laboratory work, spinning test tubes, doing PCR analysis. On the other hand, you might be a quantitative ecologist doing computer models and statistics and simulations. That was my world. Or you could be a field ecologist. Just as a brand scientist, a lot of what I do, as my company name implies, is applying the science of brand growth, as opposed to actually doing a lot of original research. However, there is still a whole lot of replication that needs to get done and expansion of some of the basic brand science. So some of what I do is continue to gather new data, in particular with clients I work with, and analyze it within the framework of some of the scientific laws of branding to see if these laws continue to be held up, continue to be supported by the data, and how the laws wiggle or shift depending upon which brand or category you're looking at.
Good to see that it's not a static thing, just like science. Just like the world is evolving, science is evolving, and the marketing science is also evolving constantly. Now, I'm on a mission to change the rather negative perception of marketing, and I want to do that by showcasing the most effective strategies, tactics, methods, little tidbits of knowledge, and that's one of the reasons I think we really fit together well. One of these core fundamentals that I believe in is that business always is based on an exchange of value. To get the basics straight, what is value to you in the context of business?
Value, in the case of being a producer or a brand, I think quite simply means taking something of low quality and adding something to make it higher quality. So if you're taking sugar cane and turning it into rum, you've added value. And so you should be able to charge more for the rum because people don't have to distill the sugar themselves, or the molasses, technically. In a service, maybe you're taking a massive amount of data and information and simplifying it so that people can then use it better, which is one of the ways I add value in my company. And then when it comes to the exchange with a consumer, the primary issue of value, I think, is they give you money and you give them that product or service. I think there is some confusion that somehow after you give them the product or service, they're supposed to give you more in the way of love or loyalty, but the primary value exchanges in financial economy, they give you money and you give them a product or service that makes their life better.
Well, that's already one myth busted. I'm sure there'll be more to come during our session here. I did a little digging, and just to set our podcast up a little and to set up how people are going to get value out of the next 45 minutes about ish that they'll listen to us, I dug up your very first blog post, and I'd like to read it to people, and I think that should set up pretty well for what's to come in the next few minutes. One thing marketers often totally miss: there are many, many ways to skin a cat. Emotional stories, consumer behaviors, influencers, celebrities, social media, outdoor, purpose, all of them can drive sales, share, and profit. There's not an obvious formula for advertising. Paradoxically, another thing marketers often miss: the most effective marketing sticks to some fundamentals and follows the natural laws of people, buy, and how to grow brands. So, there is a framework for growing your brand. That's the rub. Knowing which things in marketing don't change and which do. And then I read another post of yours, which kind of puts the whole problem into perspective. Half the ideas we have about advertising are wrong. Trouble is, we don't know which half. And this is where you come in, right? This is the kind of problem you're solving for, helping people understand what ideas about marketing are right and which are wrong. The ball over to you.
First of all, good on you for digging up my first blog post. I have not read that in a long time, and I'm pleased to say I think it holds up pretty well. It also holds up really well with the way I approach marketing and branding and what I call brand science, which is nowadays I differentiate three things. One is these laws. Laws are, as you say, things that don't change. Things like gravity or things like friction in the world of physics. And we have those, and most people have no clue they exist. So that's the first thing. Then there's the second thing, which I call levers. And levers are things you can pull, which work sometimes and not others. Brand purpose being one of them, a mascot being another, a jingle being a third, direct mail being a fourth, etc., etc. And the third one, which I don't include there, is, you could call it bullshit, for lack of a more technical term. But certainly it's the things which are just hoopla and hooey and aren't really true at all. And the problem, as I guess I did right a long time ago, is we confuse the three. For instance, Gary Vee, I think, is extremely bullish on having a social media presence and posting multiple times a day. And he thinks you have to do that if you are a brand. It's a law of branding. And he thinks TV is dead because he personally doesn't watch TV. So he's confused his own personal experience and a lever that he likes, posting multiple times on social media, as a law. On the other hand, I don't know if he knows the actual laws, like the negative binomial distribution, aka the banana curve. So that is one of the fundamental problems, is people still confuse laws and levers and hogwash.
And that means they're leaving money on the table, right? And that's an issue.
All kinds of issues. They're believing in fairy tales that don't actually work. They're spending money trying to push water uphill. Water does not flow uphill. And then, yeah, they're chasing false gods and doing things that are both inefficient, but more importantly, ineffective.
Your whole idea is that marketing should be based in science, right? But is there still a case for some aspects of gut-based decision-making in marketing, and does it always have to be scientific?
Again, the reason I think I have laws and levers is because I think it is still very much a science and an art. I think that the science part is often underappreciated by those who love the art side, and vice versa. The art side is vastly underappreciated by those who want structure and formulas and a scientific approach to marketing. A way I say it when it comes to physics is the laws of gravity and propulsion can tell you how to make a plane fly, but they can't tell you how to make people go, wow, when it goes by.
So your case is for more harmony between the two different aspects as well, not just
Indeed.
one thing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's an understanding of both, and then it's a harmonization.
So is there an easy reality check for marketers or for people who work in marketing to see whether their idea about something is based in science or is based in fantasy? This show is supported by the 30-Minute University of Planning. The 30-Minute University is a free community with over 10,000 marketing experts from all over the world. They facilitate free 30-minute one-on-one mentoring sessions between seasoned professionals and those at the start of their careers. If you are a young professional looking to learn from the best in the business, or an expert looking to offer mentorship, search the 30-Minute University on LinkedIn now.
There are ways you can check that. Sometimes it's just looking at the numbers, looking at the basic empirical data, which means you actually need to gather some empirical data. And then you can see if what you believe is fact or fantasy.
Don't you think that sometimes it's not just about the data, but also about asking the right question? Because you can answer the wrong question with the right data, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%. When I say looking at the data has to be the right data and it has to be of high quality. Because bad data can very quickly take you in the wrong direction, but it takes you there with a lot of confidence. Can I give a couple examples?
Sure, go ahead.
So, one example of bad data leading you confidently in the wrong direction are all of these surveys going around of Gen Z and the kind of brands that they want to buy from. All the data seems to suggest that Gen Z only wants to buy from brands that have social purposes and causes and are liberal. But that data is not showing you what Gen Z actually buys. It shows you how they like to be perceived when they're asked those questions. What they actually buy is shown in their actual buying behavior, which is Taco Bell and Shein, fast, cheap fashion, Amazon, Chick-fil-A, in America at least, Nike. They buy a lot of different products that seemingly have no brand purpose and seemingly have very little redeeming values. And so, yeah, that survey data will take you confidently in a very, very wrong direction.
I think in one of your talks you suggested the fridge check or the freezer check of opening one's own freezer and asking which of these products did I actually buy because of purpose. So what's in your fridge?
What's in my fridge? Geez, let's see. I've got a bunch of produce. I don't know if it's organic or not. I think it might be. I have dairy products, cheeses and milks and yogurts. I think I buy things that taste delicious. I don't know that I necessarily buy based on purpose. Of course, I buy things on sale. If there's a big tub of good Greek yogurt on sale, I'll pick that up. And then occasionally there are things that I'm a habitual purchaser of. And I say habitual instead of loyalist because I think loyalty is one of those terms that just has way too much emotional baggage to be used effectively in marketing.
Wow, so many teasers already that we'll get to dig into later. But first of all, I think we should look at another idea that I really want to challenge you with, which is believing that there is a right answer in marketing instead of hypotheses and testing and the sort of scientific method. And the reason I say that is because a lot of advertising agency work is based on saying we know exactly what the consumers want and here's the answer, and it's kind of missing this whole humility of saying, hey, maybe we don't quite know and each brand is different and we need to test and iterate based on your brand and your consumers.
Yeah, I think that, again, there's confusion between the laws, the levers, and hogwash. So there are some people who say, this is the answer. You must have a social media presence or you're dead today. Well, they don't realize that one of the strongest furniture brands in America has zero social media presence, and they're running a marketing playbook from 1895 from the Sears Roebuck Company. They send out catalogs, thousands of pages of catalogs, and they're doing quite well, thank you very much. It's called Restoration Hardware. So you get this overconfidence about your lever, and you think because it works for you, it must work for everyone, and therefore it's a law. So that's one of the dangers. I think on the flip side, again, there are laws that people don't even know. So for instance, there is a fairy tale that you can have a brand that's a niche brand with a small number of very highly loyal customers. And I'm using their terms because that's what they talk about. I'm a small niche passion brand with a lot of loyal customers. If you look at the purchasing data, quite simply, either lifetime purchasing or annual number of purchases or annual number of dollars spent on you, and look at how many of your customers are truly loyal and heavy buyers, you're probably going to find it follows a law-like behavior called the banana curve, where you've got a whole lot of light buyers, a few medium, and very, very, very few heavy buyers. We call that the 80-20 rule. It could be the 50-20 rule. It could be the 90-20 rule. 80-20, we love 80-20 because it adds up to 100. It's poetic. It sounds musical, but it could be wrong. So you got to look at the right data to see what's a law and what's a lever.
How does that binomial distribution idea and the law behind it fit into the idea of 1,000 true fans?
So when you're saying 1,000 true fans, I think you're saying that all you need is 1,000 true fans to be a healthy company. I've heard that one. And in a way, that could be true, that if you reach 1,000 true fans that pay you well and actually buy you and aren't just fans, like Ferrari, there are lots of fans of Ferrari, but very few of them own a car. The other thing that's probably not noticed in that sense of 1,000 true fans is if you have 1,000 true fans, you probably have 10,000 lightweight visitors. And you're not even counting them because they're not vocal, they haven't come back in a while. You ignore them because you're tending to your heavy-duty fans. And what you mentioned there, the negative binomial, yes, that's one of those law-like patterns. Everybody knows about the bell curve because it has a fancy nickname. Its birth name is actually the Gaussian distribution. Terrible name. But the bell curve is a fun, easy name that everybody can draw in the air with their finger. And you think, well, that's what everything is distributed like. Human height is the bell curve. Buying patterns are not a bell curve. Buying patterns are a banana curve, where it's high on one end, where all the light buyers are, and really low on the other end, where the heavy buyers are. And that is technically, its birth name is the negative binomial distribution. But as Weimar Schneiders likes to say, it should have a nickname too. It's the banana curve.
Makes it a lot easier. And I think that's one thing that both scientists and marketers often misunderstand. They put a lot of fancy words before people and then sell based on that. So I like your approach of saying it's the banana curve and then giving the back end to people that really know their stuff about maths and science and all of that. So we've talked about the banana curve. You've touched a little bit on repertoire buying, but could you dig a little bit deeper on that? What does repertoire buying even mean?
This is another one of those law-like behaviors that we see over and over. We still need to replicate in more categories and more industries, but the notion is people buy a repertoire of brands. A repertoire is a small set. Like if you're a musician, you have a repertoire of songs you play. If you're a consumer, and all of us are consumers, if you eat food, let's say, you have a repertoire of brands that you buy from. You might have a few different pasta sauces you like. You might have a few different hot sauces you like, or a few different types of bread or crackers or whatever the food is. You probably have between 1 and 4 different brands for any of those categories. Now, the same is true for big expensive things like watches and luxury handbags and cars. It's even true for education. Very few people get their bachelor's degree, their master's degree, their PhD, their JD, and their MD all from the same school. It's very common for people to have a repertoire of brands they bought their education from. I myself went to Oberlin for college, and I went to University of New Mexico for graduate school. So this is normal. And in fact, again, the size of the repertoire is itself a negative binomial distribution. It's a banana curve. So lots of people have small repertoires of 1, 2, and 3 for most products. And then a few people have very large repertoires for some products. And all of us have small repertoires for some things and large repertoires for others. If you're really into hot sauce, you probably buy a lot of different brands of hot sauce. In my case, I'm into spirits. I run a speakeasy from my garage. And I have a massive repertoire of spirits that I buy. But some people only buy 1 or 2 brands of whiskey and 1 or 2 brands of schnapps.
Awesome for going into detail with that. One question popped up for me with that. In creative strategy, you often talk about different stages of awareness. We talk about problem awareness, we talk about solution awareness, we talk about category, or as we might call it now, repertoire awareness, and then about specific brand awareness. Is there even a point to advertising for the specific brand when people buy repertoires?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because you still want your brand to be chosen over the other brands. If you are in a new category, let's say you sell mushroom coffee, which is a new thing, instead of coffee made out of coffee beans, then not only are you trying to grow the category, but you do still want people to pick your brand over others. And the same is true for old categories like tires. If you're Michelin, you still want people to pick Michelin over Goodyear. You're not just advertising tires.
Now, we've talked about two of your laws already. Is there a third one you maybe want to bring closer to our audience, and then the other ones are going to stay a mystery until people come and maybe find another one of your talks?
Sure. There are quite a few laws, and for each one, there are many, many implications. So you could spend a whole day doing a workshop unraveling the implications of a single law. And I've done that. I have clients who sign up for a long series of trainings and work, and we get deep into it. However, one of the other laws that I think is just vital is about how people make decisions, because that applies to every brand, every category, every industry, B2B, B2C, nonprofits, education, etc. And if you don't understand how humans make decisions, then you're going to be doing a lot of very useless marketing. And one of the fundamental ways that the brain operates is to be what's called a mental miser and do the least amount of thinking possible. For instance, in Germany, you probably have a very simple selection of toilet papers.
Fairly simple.
A couple
yes.
brands, a couple pack sizes. In America, it's maddening and dizzying to go shopping for toilet paper because there are at least 5 to 10 brands. Each brand has 2 or 3 different flavors. There's extra strong and extra soft. They tell you how many different sheets are there per roll, how many plies per sheet, how many square inches or square centimeters per sheet. It's dizzying to do toilet paper math. It's a pain in the ass. And most people don't want to do it. We just want to find a toilet paper that's good enough and that worked as well as the last time, or it's the one that my partner loves and I don't want to piss off my partner. We are mental misers, and it means we do the least amount of work possible to choose things from toilet paper to cars. And a trick there that the brain uses, that humans use all the time, is we replace hard questions with easy ones. A hard question is that new all-electric BMW a high-quality car? That's actually a really hard question to answer on your own. So we replace it with an easy question, which is, what does my buddy buy who knows a lot about cars? Or which one is the most expensive? If it's expensive, we assume it's probably better. And the BMW is more expensive than the Hyundai, so we think it's better. So if you don't realize that one of the fundamental laws of shopping is that humans don't want to do toilet paper math and that we replace hard questions with easy ones, you're going to be wasting a lot of time trying to educate and focus on RTBs and focus on all of these logical, factual things, when in fact, sometimes it's just a matter of, wow, when I close the car door, it sounds like a nice, beautiful luxury car versus a tin can.
That leads perfectly into my next question, which I had written down, which was about rational advertising versus emotional advertising. How effective is emotional advertising? And I mean, you've talked a little bit about it there, but is there even a case still for rational advertising beyond sales-driven marketing?
Oh, absolutely there is, and here's one of the problems. One of the problems is rational and emotional are caricatures of how humans think and how decisions are made. Every decision is a mix of rational and emotional. And in fact, emotional responses and emotional choices can be extremely smart in the sense that an emotional choice can be an intuitive choice that is based on years of training. You might not have the conscious understanding of why you made that choice, but you have an instant gut emotional response, and it's very, very smart and very, very accurate. So in fact, I've kind of moved away from rational and emotional. I think it's a fallacy like the heart and the mind that takes us in the wrong direction with our decisions and our debates. We start debating emotional versus rational, when instead what we probably should be discussing is conscious versus unconscious, or effortful versus intuitive. You want people to make intuitive decisions about your brand. You want them to make unconscious decisions about your brand. That's where to focus.
Wow, yes. I guess we could take part from emotional and rational and maybe think more about the involvement of the customer or the potential consumer with the product and what that means for the purchasing decision.
Yeah, rational and emotional it's one of those debates that you get tangled up in it and the whole premise is wrong. And so you have to reject the whole premise, and that gets you out of the rational and emotional debate and gets you into much more useful area, like what are the conscious things we need to address and what are the unconscious things we need to address.
Awesome. You touched on it a little bit with your mental mincels, if I get that word correct, that these laws don't only apply to B2C, even though when I look at your LinkedIn posts, many of them are B2C oriented, but many of them will probably also apply to B2B. Could you touch a little bit more on that?
On the differences or commonalities between B2B and B2C?
Yeah, and how the laws apply to them.
We tend to think that the B2B world is operated by a whole different set of rules because somehow when you put on, well, I was going to say when you put on a suit, but nobody puts on a suit anymore when they go to work. In fact, most of us are just wearing pajamas from the waist down. We have this crazy fairy tale that B2B people suddenly become rational, logical, intelligent, highly knowledgeable, and very careful in their choices. And that's a fairy tale because if you talk to any group of people who have to buy an email software service, you see the exact same things as you see when you talk to people about them making a choice for motor oil, which is they have some vague awareness of the software services out there. They might have heard of some of them like MailChimp, and the sticky ones stick in their brains and the hard to remember ones don't, and they've got a fuzzy understanding. It's a hard category to choose. How do you know which software service for your emails is the best and the best for you and the best price and the best value and the best customer service? So you do what we do when we have to buy, a pair of cleats, is we replace that hard question of which one's the best one for me with an easy question, which is which one feels right, or which one does my buddy use and he's in a company about my size, or which one does Gartner say is the highest in their Magic Quadrant rating. So it's the same. It's remarkably similar, but we have this fairy tale that once you enter the business world, you're not the same mushy, leaky, lazy-brained human you are when you're watching Game of Thrones or the Euro Cup.
So people are just people, and it doesn't really matter too much in which context, whether business to business or business to consumer, they just still act as people.
I think it's that you can't throw out the laws when you change category. You have to still deal with them and address them and realize that they're real. When you change categories, you definitely need to assess what's happening in your category versus others. One example might be in the B2B world, you might have a committee of people making a choice, whereas in B2C, you've got one or maybe two people making a choice about what cereal to buy. So a committee is a bigger bunch of humans, but it's a bigger bunch of the same humans with the same biases and the same mental miser patterns.
For all of the listeners here, could you maybe dive into what salience is, first of all, because it's quite a complicated concept, and whether you believe in it and whether you think it works?
Salience. Yes, salience is, I want to say it's a slightly newer term, certainly newer than awareness, which we all seem to be quite aware of. And I think it's this sense that if you know of a brand at all, it's not quite the same as thinking of it when you're thinking of occasion where you would buy that brand. So for a brand to be salient means it probably comes to mind in that moment when you think of buying or using that brand or that category. So it's a little bit different than awareness, but a lot of these concepts are concepts that we're creating to help us make sense of something which is very amorphous and very complicated, which is how the brain works and how humans decide things. So salience might be that if you're hungry and you need a snack, what brand comes to mind?
Snickers, probably?
Snickers might be one. Maybe you should think of a liquid snack. I don't know. And maybe a smoothie should come to mind. Or jerky, beef jerky. Or if you're really into paleo but you want chips, maybe something called chicken chips. Wild is a brand that makes chicken chips. And did they come to mind at all when you're peckish and you're hungry and you need a snack? So salience is that notion that the brand comes to mind in those occasions. Do I believe in it? Sure, I believe in it. I mean, I don't think it's a terrible concept at all. It's pretty good. And it does seem to add a little bit of extra nuance that the word awareness doesn't quite have always.
With that nuance, we're already moving a little bit further away from laws and getting a little bit more into levers. What can you tell us about levers and what sort of differentiation to the laws?
Well, again, the first thing is levers are things that can work for me and not for thee, or they can work for me this year and not next year. So they're really annoying. Levers are maddening. Levers are challenging. The other thing about levers is the data rarely tells you which lever to pull, because also multiple levers could answer the same problem, could solve the same situation. For instance, one lever that you can pull is to kill your mascot, to do some big PR stunts with your mascot. Recently, I guess it was a few years ago now, Planters nuts in America, I think they're global, but Planters, their mascot is Mr. Peanut, I think. He was killed in a horrific car crash with Wesley Snipes just before the Super Bowl in the States. And then during the Super Bowl, which is, of course, an amazing time for advertising, Mr. Peanut was resurrected by the tears of High C, or the Kool-Aid Man, I forget which one, and Baby Nut was born. And that was great. For the first time in 50 years, a vast amount of Americans were thinking about and talking about Mr. Peanut and Planters. Can they do it again? I don't know if you can kill off your mascot again and again and again. I mean, maybe you can. Kenny's a character on South Park that dies every time. But that's a lever that they pulled. It got them more fame than presidential candidates had at the moment. Are they going to pull it again? I don't know. Can they? I don't know. Does it work for your brand? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe not if you don't have a mascot. Maybe you need a mascot to begin with. So levers are great. Levers are maddening. One of the other issues of levers is that you have to keep exploring and keep trying different ones because you're never quite sure which ones are going to be good this year.
So I guess that fits into our topic of test and iterate that we talked about earlier a little bit. You don't quite know which lever to pull, so you've got to pull one and then observe and maybe change it up sometime later.
Yes. Again, given that there are some laws you don't have to retest for. You don't have to test for gravity. We know gravity exists. Mm-hmm. You don't have to test for that people like chocolate. We know people like chocolate. So some things you don't have to test, but there are other things like the levers where you do need to constantly test. You need to test how they're doing now or whether they're getting weaker. And you have to continue to explore. I'm a big fan of a principle called explore and exploit. And this actually comes from my background as an evolutionary biologist and ecologist, which is all organisms have to continue to explore different options and opportunities because the environment keeps changing. The classic example is bees and flowers. Bees love pollen. They gather it and take it back to their hive and make honey out of it and grow babies out of it. But they need to go find it. And so they have to explore their environment. And then once they find a bush or a tree where the flowers are blooming and there's lots of pollen, they exploit the hell out of it. And all the bees, they do a little waggle dance and communicate to each other of where to go to get all the pollen. And they all go there and start pulling it all back. But there's some lazy, weird, free-thinking bees who don't do that. They're still out there exploring because eventually that bush or that tree will lose its bloom and all the pollen will be gone and the flowers will be dead. And the bees have to go find another source of pollen. That's the same with brands. If you are doing marketing, you find some great bush, a great tactic or a great strategy, you still need to probably be sending out sentinels to other tactics and other strategies for when the market changes.
Now, you made quite a clear case against pulling the lever twice. For example, with Mr. Peanut, with the lever of killing your brand icon. Is there a case for repeating an ad nearly unchanged? Because I once read some research on that quite often when you have a winning ad, rerunning it is better than making a new one. But how the world of advertising works, the marketing manager has to prove that they're doing something and then
Right.
change the ad and actually perform worse. So
Right.
what's your take on that?
Yes. So first of all, let me clarify that I don't want to come across as saying you can never pull the same lever twice. I'm saying that levers are sometimes really annoying because sometimes they don't work a second time, which is frustrating. But if you find a lever that works, hell yes, you should stick with it. If Restoration Hardware is having success with their catalogs, stick with your catalogs. Keep sending them out. Send them out every damn year. In your case, you were saying if you have a good advertisement and it's successful, hell yes, stick with it. If you have a good campaign, absolutely stick with it. Because for both of those, odds are good. Most people have never even seen it. Odds are good it's going to be effective much longer than you think it will be. Odds are good that if you tweak it and come up with a slightly different example of that same storyline, that will actually build like compound interest and make people remember the whole campaign better. So you absolutely should stick with a healthy brand campaign or keep running a healthy ad much longer than you want to. And you're right, the incentives are often very misaligned between what's good for the brand and what's good for the employee. And that happens at companies, and it happens with ad agencies, and it happens with media companies. If those two things are misaligned, you get that situation where the employee, let's say the brand manager, wants to make their mark. And so they want a new campaign. They want to make an ad that they've greenlit. Meanwhile, the brand might be much better served by rerunning the same ad about tasting the rainbow over and over and over again. So yeah, that's a challenge.
I guess that plays into memory structures as well. Just pure repetition quite often works until obviously you might get tired of advertising. But until you do, that might work. Now, Ethan, is there any question about laws or levers that I should have asked so far that I haven't?
Well, no, your questions have been pretty darn good. I think we've covered some of the biggest issues of awareness of the laws, of telling apart laws versus levers versus hogwash, of the importance of testing levers and constantly doing an explore, exploit thing with your levers. No, I think that's a good introduction. It's a good start. Absolutely.
Then we come to your third little bit, which was bullshit. And I'd like to challenge you to maybe call out an international brand right here on this show that you think is currently doing bullshit.
Sure. Well, here's one. It's I don't know how up to date I am on it, but I know that recently Unilever had fully committed themselves to making sure every brand in their vast portfolio had a brand purpose. And just for fun, I want to look up some of the brands that Unilever owns because some people might not know. They own personal care things like Dove and Axe, but they also own food like Magnum chocolate, and they own cleaners like Persil. I think they own mayonnaise brands. They own a lot of different brands. And so they believed we need to be doing brand purpose. This is clearly a law, and every brand needs to have, and the consumers now all want to buy from brands that have brand purpose. That's what the surveys say. So they confidently went down this, I think, bad garden path of making sure that their mayonnaise and their cleaners, kitchen counter cleaners, had brand purpose. I think that was sadly a bit of a wasted effort and probably resulted in a lot of ineffective marketing being built, being focused on, being worked on, trying to figure out what is the purpose of mayonnaise. And so it's not just a waste of money, which is a shame, but it's a waste of time and effort, and it burns people out, which is also a terrible thing.
Basically, you're saying that all of this effort spent on giving mayonnaise purpose is pretty bullshit and probably not very effective.
Yeah. I've been in way too many rooms where brands have talked about how does their product ladder up to higher and higher benefits, higher order benefits. And ultimately, if your mayonnaise is bringing world peace, then you're in the bullshit stratosphere for sure. Or if your carpet cleaner is helping ameliorate racism across the planet, you're in the bullshit stratosphere. On the other hand, if that's a lever you're going to pull, you have to really pull it. Pull it hard, pull it consistently, plaster everything with it, because again, humans are mental misers. They don't really want to think about products and brands all day. They got more important things to think about. So brands are a shorthand to not think about which carpet cleaner to buy, to not think about which mayonnaise to buy. You just want to grab it from the store and go home and start cooking, or go to the vet and pick up your dog. If you are going to pull the brand purpose lever, you have to pull it really hard for anyone to notice, anyone to remember. You have to do it right so that anyone believes it. And there are very few brands that can effectively do that.
We've learned about the laws, we've learned about the levers, we've learned about some bullshit. How can you learn more about this?
Well, they can always call me. Reach out, find me. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a silly little website. You can find a lot more information. I post on LinkedIn once a week. I have an email newsletter. It comes out roughly once a week, but it's pretty irregular. And I do talks. You can bring me in for talks. My company is growing, so we're also looking to expand our services, both domestically and overseas. But there are other providers of this information as well out there who are really great people who are doing some of the primary research, or people who are proselytizing and spreading the good word all over the world. So Applied Brand Science isn't your only source, but come talk to us if you have more questions.
AppliedBrandScience.com.
Yes. Come to Applied Brand Science for all of the best brand science to apply to your brand in a sciencey way.
Talking about these other institutions, do you want to give a shout out to some of them?
Sure. We can't not mention the Ehrenberg Bass Institute from Australia. I think they're in the University of South Australia, and they have done a whole lot of primary research on this topic. We can't not mention the IPA Institute for Practitioners in Advertising, who are from the UK and have done a whole lot of research as well. Weimer Schneider's put together a beautiful little book. I mentioned him earlier, so I'll mention him again. His book called Eat Your Greens is a lovely little bunch of information about brand science as well. And you know what, David, I do want to add one more thing, because again, I don't want to just look like I'm the science guy that thinks everything is explicable via science. I would also say people should continue to follow and listen to folks like Martin Weigel, who's a planner from Wieden & Kennedy in Amsterdam, I believe. And frankly, a lot of the other stuff that Wieden & Kennedy has done and has written, and the folks there, because they really understand the art. They're incredible at nuance and expression and multiple levers, and doing levers in very strategic ways. So I'm a big fan of Wieden & Kennedy as well.
Me too. Kind of hard to get into though. Either way, what is sort of a best practice case for using laws and levers that you've recently encountered?
I've been working with Lazy Boy, a furniture maker in the United States. They brought me in to go through the laws and levers, and it's really helped them stop doing some things which were less effective, that were more focused on fairy tale, and really focus on how do you grow in a way is based on empirical evidence, like the banana curve, is based on laws like the mental miser. And that's enabled them to readjust their efforts to expand their audience, and yet also not just do it in ways that are more effective because they're following the laws, but to start to pull more levers. So they've been exploring and experimenting with a lot more marketing. One of the things they did recently was a partnership with Garfield, the movie. And I don't know the last time they've done that, but they came out with a Garfield Lazy Boy chair in custom colors and custom features in order to let people know they exist, let people know that they're still a great brand, that they're still high quality furniture for when you want to kick back and have a lazy afternoon or lazy weekend.
Now, we've got some people listening here on this podcast from startups, and startups obviously have very limited resources and maybe can't even afford to hire you or really spend a lot on marketing. What's one thing or one law or one, maybe even a lever that you would pull as a startup?
Startups are in a situation where the laws do seem to apply, but other things do also seem to apply that might matter more. My metaphor for this is, if you're in a vehicle traveling on the ground, gravity matters a lot. Obviously, if you're going uphill in a truck full of furniture, it's going to go slowly and it's going to use a lot of gas. However, if you're on a bicycle, and the Tour de France is about to start, or if you're on a bicycle, gravity might not matter as much as wind resistance. 70% of your effort, sometimes even 90% of your effort, is not fighting gravity, it's fighting wind. And so aerodynamics might be much more important than rolling resistance or fighting gravity, how heavy your bicycle is. Everyone loves to get super lightweight bicycles when they buy a bike. But actually, wind resistance might matter more. In the same way, I think as a tiny brand or a startup, and not all startups are so tiny if they're well funded, there might be other things that matter more than some of these fundamental laws. So for instance, you might really need celebrity to launch a brand. And we've seen how important celebrity is, and having a celebrity endorser or having a famous celebrity involved can really matter to brand growth. Or even having celebrities seen wearing or using or eating or drinking your product. That can be a massive influence. And that might matter more than a lot of other things that matter to big brands. But yeah, tiny brands and startups, they benefit from understanding the laws and levers. Absolutely. But there are occasionally some other factors that matter a lot more.
Maybe these individuals also have a personal brand or are starting to build a personal brand. Is there anything that can be pulled from these very large laws and levers that we mostly think of as working for companies down to a personal level, and how would we apply that?
I think they are very similar. I think that in this sense of building up your own personal brand, one of the things you face is something that every brand struggles with, which is, as we talked about earlier, awareness or salience. Do people even think of you at all? I think it's misattributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, the former First Lady of President Roosevelt, which was a quote that said, "Darling, you'd worry much less about what people think of you when you realize how little they think of you at all." It's sad, but it's also freeing, because if you stop worrying so much about what people think of you and realize they're not thinking of you at all, it changes your focus. A big reason applied brand science is so orange and so adamantly orange and uses the logo everywhere is because we're trying to get people to think of us at all. And that applies to your personal brand as well. So a lot of the same rules apply. Absolutely.
You said you had a little bar in your garage. What's your favorite drink?
Oh, man. I've made a lot of original cocktails lately, so some of those are really fun, and I do that because guests have been bringing me very interesting, unique spirits to play with. But one of my favorites, I must say, and it's a modern standard, a modern classic, is called the Paper Plane. The Paper Plane is an equal parts drink. I believe it's equal parts bourbon, Amaro Nonino, Aperol, and lemon juice, so about an ounce of each. Shake it up with some ice and put on some MIA, because her song Paper Plane was the inspiration for the name.
When was the last time you felt like a business went above and beyond to provide you value, and what made it so memorable?
One example is there's a great restaurant in Boulder called Bramble and Hare. The bartender now knows me, and when I go in, not only does he say hi, Ethan, but he actually comes out of the bar and over to the table to say hi and talk. And then often he'll just make a cocktail based on something he's working on. So I get to taste his new inventions. That's a really lovely touch. I mean, he's busy and he's slinging drinks for all the other guests, but he comes over to say hi.
Now is your big time to shine. If there's one message you could give to all of the listeners right now, what is it?
One message to give all the listeners. Life is short. Enjoy it. Be kind to people. Do things that bring you joy and make your life meaningful.
Right, Ethan. Thank you very, very much for coming on this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it too. And check out Ethan on appliedbrandscience.com.
appliedbrandscience.com. David, thank you for having me. This is super fun to chat.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Brands of Value. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing or following this channel. Don't forget to share it with someone and help spread the word of these awesome marketing ideas. Cheers!